Tasha sat in seat 1A, her fingers gently tracing the edge of her phone, barely aware of the hum of conversation around her. She'd been flying for years, but this flight was different. This was a routine check, a test for the airline she owned, the one that had become a household name. Skyline Airlines had once been nothing more than a dream, an ambitious goal born from years of struggle. Now, it was a reflection of her, sleek, powerful, and perhaps a little too much for some people to handle. She'd wanted to test the crew's standards, to see how they treated someone who wasn't just a random passenger, but someone with absolute power. She hadn't expected to be tested in return. The door to first class opened, and a voice floated in, sharp, condescending, unmistakably focused. "Excuse me, ma'am, this seat is for premium passengers only." Tasha looked up slowly, the words hanging in the air like the sharp sting of an insult. The voice belonged to a flight attendant, her name tag gleaming under the overhead light. Samantha. Her smile was forced, eyes scanning Tasha like she was something to be managed, something not worthy of the privilege she'd paid for. Samantha wasn't looking at Tasha like a valued customer. She was sizing her up, trying to place her in the mental boxes that she'd long since abandoned. "Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong seat," she added, her voice too loud, echoing across the small but packed cabin. "I'll have to ask you to move." Tasha's heart rate didn't pick up. Her expression didn't change. She simply lifted her boarding pass, handing it to Samantha. "I'm in the right seat. This one's mine." The words were calm, deliberate, as if she was speaking to a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. Samantha glanced at the ticket, hesitated, then shook her head with exaggerated force. "I'm sorry, that this seat is assigned to someone else." Tasha didn't speak. Not yet. She knew the game being played here, the power struggle that was beginning to unfold, and she wouldn't let herself be caught in it. She was better than that. Samantha's posture shifted, no longer professional but tight, defensive. "I'm going to have to ask you to move to a different seat, ma'am. Maybe economy or even the back of the plane. It's no trouble." Her words dropped like stones into the silence that followed. Tasha kept her gaze steady, letting the tension between them build. No trouble. Tasha clenched her jaw. She knew this story, had lived it, seen it replayed in every corner of her life. This wasn't about the seat. This was about something far uglier. She had to give Samantha a moment to let it sink in. "Not happening," Tasha said simply, her voice sharp, low but powerful. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a challenge. It was the cold, undeniable truth of the moment. "I'm not moving." Samantha blinked, thrown off by the quiet authority in Tasha's tone, a moment of hesitation cracking the illusion of control she was trying to maintain. Her eyes darted briefly across the cabin, people watching, some pretending to read, some looking away quickly. But she saw them all, felt their eyes on her, eyes that now saw her differently. Samantha stepped back, her smile replaced by a thin line of frustration. "Please, man, I really must insist. This is for the comfort of all passengers." She shifted from foot to foot, a little too eager to get this over with, as if she was hoping this all would be resolved with one more offer of a seat, one more request to move. "Is there a problem?" Tasha's voice cut through the air like a blade. There it was, the cold edge that came with power, with control, with knowing exactly what the next move would be before anyone had the chance to react. The atmosphere shifted. A low hum of murmurs began to ripple through the cabin, quiet but growing louder by the second. Tasha's words had weight. Samantha looked over her shoulder at the passengers who had begun to pay attention. Some of them were watching her now, watching the way she stood, still as a statue, in her own seat. The tension built. It was like a slow burn, like the way flames start in dry grass, unnoticed at first, until the whole field is on fire. Samantha blinked and gave a short nod, stepping away as if to seek backup, to prove that her authority was legitimate. but that only intensified the undercurrent of anger. There was no backup here. No one was coming to fix this, to rescue her from the inevitable confrontation she'd just sparked. The flight attendants in the back murmured to one another, casting furtive glances. No one wanted to take sides, but no one was blind either. And then, as if on cue, Captain Lane appeared at the front of the cabin. He wasn't tall, but his presence was undeniable, with a silver nameplate gleaming under the soft cabin lights. His eyes were sharp, like a hawk's, assessing everything before him. He scanned the cabin in a single sweep, quickly but thorough. Samantha immediately rushed toward him, her words spilling out before she even got to the front of the plane. "Captain, we have an issue in first class. She's refusing to move. She won't leave the seat. She's causing a disturbance." Tasha didn't look up. She didn't need to. She knew what was coming. The cycle was starting. The captain approached, his uniform crisp, the scent of expensive aftershave faint in the air. It was all so mechanical, the way he moved, the way his eyes flicked to the ticket in his hand, the way his voice filled the air with authority. "Ma'am, I understand there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his tone one of forced calm. Tasha raised an eyebrow, cool, collected. She didn't react to the subtle insinuation in his words. She didn't need to. "No misunderstanding," she replied flatly. "I'm in the seat I paid for." There was no anger in her voice, no heat, just a quiet, controlled certainty. Her eyes met his, and for a split second she saw the flicker of recognition. And then the moment hit, like a slap, sharp and clear. Captain Lane stepped back, frowning. His mind began to churn, processing the growing realization. He took a moment to glance back at the passengers, his face unreadable. The tension built in the cabin, reaching a pitch where every breath felt like it might snap the fragile thread holding it all together. There was no turning back now. Tasha wasn't going anywhere. And she was about to remind everyone why she owned this airline. The last words were spoken. "You really want to do this?" Tasha's voice was a challenge, but not a threat. Just a question. One with all the weight of a universe about to collapse on those who couldn't see her for what she truly was. And then, as everything in the room fell silent, she pulled out her phone. Just a simple text, but the words were all it took. "It's time." A quiet ripple of electricity ran through the air. The captain's face twisted into confusion, then horror, as he glanced at his phone. His hands shook for the briefest second. This wasn't just any passenger. This was Tasha Johnson, the CEO of Skyline Airlines. And in that moment, everyone in the cabin felt it. The balance of power shifting. The game they thought they were playing, suddenly becoming something else entirely. Tasha stood, slowly, as the entire crew realized the enormity of their mistake. And the flight, once full of mundane routine, was now marked by something far greater. A reckoning was coming. Captain Lane stood frozen, his eyes glued to his phone. The cabin was deathly silent, the low hum of the engines the only sound that dared to fill the void. Tasha's calm gaze never wavered, her posture relaxed but unyielding, like a queen surveying her court. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just any passenger sitting in front of them. He had just tried to force the owner of the airline out of her seat. The weight of the moment crushed his chest, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if the ground would open up and swallow him whole. Tasha didn't move, not even an inch, as the passengers watched, their eyes flicking back and forth between the captain and the woman who just revealed the truth. There was no panic, no anger, just quiet authority that filled the space around her, suffocating the flight attendants who had tried to challenge her. Captain Lane took a deep breath, his fingers trembling slightly as he held the phone in his hand. He glanced back at Samantha, who was standing a few feet behind him, her face pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea what she had just unleashed. "Ma'am," Captain Lane said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize. We didn't." He stopped himself, swallowing hard. Tasha could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that he had just made an irreversible mistake. "Don't apologize to me," Tasha said calmly, her voice a soft but firm command. "Apologize to your crew. They're the ones who need to learn their place." Her words cut through the air like a knife, sharp and precise, and for a moment, the tension in the cabin became unbearable. Samantha's face turned red, her eyes darting between Tasha and Captain Lane, unsure of what to do. She had misjudged Tasha in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The passengers around them, still silent but increasingly uncomfortable, shifted in their seats, unsure whether to speak up or stay out of it. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath.
"You're right,"
Captain Lane finally managed to say, his voice strained. "This is entirely my fault. I'll speak with the crew. We'll handle it." Tasha gave a small nod, her eyes never leaving his. "That's what I thought," she said, the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to catch." With that, she stood up, gracefully moving around Captain Lane, who stepped aside without a word. As she walked down the aisle, the eyes of every passenger in the cabin followed her, some with admiration, others with shame. Samantha stood frozen for a moment longer, her mind racing, trying to piece together the weight of what had just occurred. She had challenged the CEO of the airline, and in doing so, had exposed herself for what she truly was, a person who believed her own assumptions about who deserved what. It wasn't about the seat. It was about something far deeper, something that had been bubbling beneath the surface of the industry for far too long. And now, Tasha had done what no one else had been brave enough to do. She had revealed the cracks in the system. Tasha didn't look back as she made her way to the galley, where the flight attendants had gathered, whispering in hushed tones. She could hear the faint murmur of their voices as she passed, but she didn't stop. She didn't need to. The truth had been laid bare. She had made her point. Now it was time for them to deal with the consequences. As she entered the galley, Samantha followed behind her, still unsure whether she should apologize or remain silent. Tasha turned to face her, her expression unreadable. "Do you have anything to say?" Tasha asked, her voice cool and detached. Samantha hesitated for a moment before speaking, her words coming out in a rush. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know, "You didn't know?" Tasha interrupted, her gaze sharp. "That's the problem. You assumed I didn't belong. You assumed because of the way I look, the way I dress, that I wasn't worthy of sitting here. You treated me like I was invisible, like I was something less. And that's where you went wrong." Samantha looked down, unable to meet her eyes. I didn't mean to offend you. Tasha stepped closer, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "You didn't offend me, Samantha. You offended everyone on this flight. You made them believe it was okay to treat someone like me, like I'm not supposed to be here. You made them believe that their assumptions about people based on how they look are right. And that's something I won't stand for." Samantha opened her mouth to say something else, but no words came out. She was too shaken, too embarrassed by the realization of what she had done. "Do you think this is the first time this has happened?" Tasha asked, her voice steady and unyielding. "This happens every day, Samantha. People like you, people who think they're better than others, think they can control who gets to sit where, who gets to be treated with respect. It's been happening for years, but I'm not going to let it happen anymore." Samantha nodded, still unable to speak. Tasha turned to the other flight attendants, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "You all need to learn something," Tasha said, her voice rising slightly. "It's not about the seat. It's about dignity. It's about respecting everyone, no matter who they are, what they look like, or how much money they have. That's what matters." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of her words. Tasha didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back to her seat, the room still buzzing with the energy of the moment, the crew and passengers alike trying to process what had just happened. As she sat back down, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her assistant. "Everything's set. Your meeting is ready. The board is waiting for you." Tasha smiled to herself, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. She wasn't just here for a meeting. She wasn't just here to fly. She was here to change the way things were done. And she wasn't going to stop until that change had been made. The seatbelt sign dinged above, signaling the beginning of their descent. Tasha sat back, closing her eyes, letting the hum of the plane settle around her. It had only just begun. Tasha sat in her seat, her fingers brushing the edge of her phone once again, though her mind was miles away. The plane had descended toward their destination, but she wasn't thinking about the meeting that awaited her in London. Her mind was still back in that first-class cabin, replaying the looks of disbelief from the crew, the weight of their assumptions, and the bitter taste of their judgment. She could feel their eyes on her, even now, in the quiet aftermath of their encounter. The captain had left the galley moments after their exchange, his words no longer necessary. The crew had scattered, but the tension remained. The flight attendants, especially Samantha, seemed to shrink under her gaze whenever they passed her seat. They were trying to avoid her eyes, but Tasha could see the subtle shifts in their posture, defensive, guilty. They had underestimated her. They had believed they could push her around, treat her like an intruder in her own space. But now, as the final descent to London continued, the reality of their mistake was starting to sink in for them. Tasha had won this battle with quiet authority, but the war, the larger fight against prejudice and assumption, was far from over. She couldn't let this incident go unnoticed. It couldn't be a single, fleeting moment. It had to be the beginning of something bigger. The seatbelt sign flickered on, and the smooth voice of the flight attendant echoed through the cabin, urging passengers to prepare for landing. Tasha fastened her seatbelt, not because it was required, but because it gave her a moment of stillness, a brief moment to reflect. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the cabin wash over her. Soft murmurs from other passengers, the quiet clinking of glasses, the faint hum of the engines. She needed this. She needed a moment before she stepped off this plane and into the next phase of her mission. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her assistant. "The board is awaiting you. The press is already on standby. Are you ready?" Tasha glanced at the screen, then tucked her phone away. Ready? She had been ready for this moment long before she had even stepped foot on this flight. This was more than a simple board meeting. This was her chance to reshape the future of Skyline Airlines, to take control of something that had long been tainted by assumptions and outdated mindsets. As the plane touched down and the wheels screeched against the runway, a sense of finality washed over her. This wasn't just about correcting an injustice. This was about setting a new standard. Tasha stood as the plane taxied toward the gate, collecting her bag from the overhead compartment with quiet precision. Her movements were deliberate, calculated, as she made her way down the aisle. The crew was still there, still trying to find their footing in the aftermath of her reveal. As she approached the front of the cabin, she noticed Samantha standing near the door, fiddling nervously with her hands. Their eyes met, but this time there was no defiance in Samantha's gaze, no challenge, just the weight of realization that had settled in like an uncomfortable truth. Tasha couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for Samantha to fully grasp what had happened, to understand the magnitude of the error she'd made. Tasha's steps were slow but steady as she passed Samantha, offering nothing more than a subtle nod. There was no need for words. Samantha was already fully aware of her mistake. And as Tasha stepped off the plane, the ground beneath her felt steady, firm. She was about to enter a world where she was no longer just a passenger, no longer just an observer of injustice. Now, she would be the one pulling the strings, making sure that this didn't happen again, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated. The airport was a whirlwind of activity as she moved through the terminal, the familiar buzz of announcements and the sound of rolling suitcases surrounding her. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the crowds as she made her way to the private lounge where the board meeting was about to begin. It was there that she would make her statement, not with anger, but with the kind of authority that couldn't be ignored. The lounge was quiet when she entered, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The board members were already seated around the large conference table, papers and laptops scattered in front of them. They looked up as she entered, their faces a mix of surprise and curiosity. They hadn't expected her to walk in the way she had, with the same quiet power she'd displayed on the plane. "Let's get to it," she said, her voice cutting through the air, strong but calm. "I hope you've all had a chance to look over the proposals. But first, we need to address something much more important." The board members exchanged confused glances, unsure of what she meant. Tasha could see their unease. They didn't know what was coming. She took a seat at the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over each of them. What happened on that plane today wasn't just about a seat. It wasn't even about me. It was about something much bigger. It was about the assumptions we make, the biases we don't even know we have. And it's about time we change that. There was a beat of silence. Then one of the board members, Derek, cleared his throat. "Tasha, are you talking about the incident with the crew on the flight?" he asked, his voice tentative. "Because we've already discussed—" "No," she interrupted, her voice low and unwavering. "This isn't just about a single incident. This is about a culture we've built. A culture that tolerates this kind of behavior, this kind of thinking. And it ends now." The room was silent again, the weight of her words settling heavily in the air. Tasha could feel the shift, the way the energy in the room began to change. They were beginning to understand. And it wasn't just the board members who were listening. It was the entire airline, from the top down. She was going to change the way Skyline Airlines operated. She was going to make sure that no one ever had to face the kind of prejudice she had just experienced. "We'll need a complete overhaul of our training programs," Tasha continued, her voice gaining momentum. "Every employee, from the top down, needs to go through mandatory sensitivity and bias training. We need to make sure that everyone understands what we stand for, not just as a company, but as a society." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. And if anyone doesn't want to be a part of that change, if anyone thinks they can continue treating people like they're less than human, then they need to leave. It's as simple as that. There was a long pause as the board members exchanged uncertain glances. Derek spoke first, his voice quieter now. "We can implement those changes, Tasha. But what about the public perception? How do we make sure people see that we're serious?" Tasha leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving him. "We show them. We make an example out of today. We take this incident and turn it into something positive, something that will change the entire industry. We lead by example, and we make sure that everyone knows. Skyline Airlines is a place where everyone belongs." The room was still for a moment longer, but it wasn't filled with uncertainty anymore. There was a shift, a quiet acceptance of the change that was about to unfold. Tasha knew this was only the beginning, but it was a beginning that felt right. The world wasn't ready for her vision, but she was going to make them see it anyway. As the meeting continued, Tasha felt the weight of the day's events settle into her bones. It wasn't about the small battles. It was about the war she was fighting for something much bigger. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally winning. The next few days blurred together for Tasha. The meetings were endless, the phone calls never stopped, and the weight of the decisions she had to make pressed down on her shoulders. But through it all, she maintained the same calm, unyielding presence that had carried her through everything. Skyline Airlines was no longer just a business. It was her mission. The board had agreed to the new training policies, to the restructured customer service procedures, and to the public apology that would be issued within the week. But Tasha knew this wasn't enough. There were deeper issues, ones that couldn't be solved with just a few new rules. She needed to root out the problem, not just slap a band-aid on it. On the third day after the meeting, Tasha stood at the head of a conference room, overlooking a team of her executives. They were going over the final details of a company-wide internal memo. "I want this to be clear," she said, her voice calm, but with an edge that made the room hush. "This isn't just a public relations move. This isn't just about making us look good for the media. We are going to make this change for real. Skyline Airlines is going to be a company that people believe in, not just for the service we provide, but for the way we treat every single person who walks through our doors." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I won't tolerate excuses from anyone. This includes every department, customer service, flight crew, management, everyone. We are changing everything, and I'm holding every one of you accountable for making this happen." A low murmur spread across the room. Tasha knew what they were thinking. This was a company-wide shift, something that would take time to implement, something that would be difficult. But she was undeterred. She had seen how far complacency could take a company, how quickly it could rot from the inside out if no one had the courage to make the hard calls. She'd been that person before, the one who had to make the tough choices no one else wanted to make. Tasha looked across the table, her eyes locking with Derek, her CFO. He was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, a thoughtful look on his face. He had been with her from the beginning, back when she had turned Skyline Airlines from a small regional carrier into the global powerhouse it had become. But this was a new challenge, one neither of them had faced before. "Derek," Tasha said, her voice still even but firm, "I need you to prioritize the budget for this. I want the necessary resources allocated immediately. We're not skimping on training, staff support, or anything else that will make this change real. This isn't just a cost. It's an investment." He nodded slowly. "I understand. We'll get the numbers to you by the end of the week. But you're right. This is going to be expensive. We need to be prepared for the backlash, especially from the shareholders." "I'm not worried about shareholders right now," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't about them. This is about setting a precedent. If we can't do it right, if we can't make this real, then what's the point of being in this business? We're not just here to make money. We're here to change the industry. That's the long-term investment." Her words hung in the air, and the room was quiet for a moment longer. The executives around the table were beginning to understand that this wasn't just another corporate initiative. This was Tasha's mission. This was something she cared about with every fiber of her being. The meeting broke, and as the executives filed out, Tasha lingered for a moment, her eyes scanning over the documents they had just reviewed. The noise of the office outside began to fade as she sank into the weight of her thoughts. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant. "The press is ready. They're asking for a comment on the training program. Do you have a statement prepared?" Tasha stared at the message for a moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. The press. It was inevitable. Once the internal changes started rolling out, the media would be all over it. They would want to know why she was doing this, what had made her push so hard for these changes, and whether it would actually work. Tasha didn't want to give them a simple soundbite. She didn't want this to be just another corporate spin. She needed them to understand why this mattered, why it had to matter. She typed out a quick response. We are not just changing our policies. We are changing the way this entire industry operates. It's time to stop treating people like they don't matter, like their worth is determined by what they look like or what they can afford. We're going to create a company where everyone, staff and customers alike, feels respected, valued, and treated with dignity. This is not a choice. This is who we are. She hit send and leaned back in her chair. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a brief moment of stillness. It wasn't about making the headlines. It wasn't about being popular. It was about doing the right thing, about showing the world that power didn't just come from money. It came from integrity, from standing firm even when the entire system tried to push you down. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. She recognized the number instantly. Tasha Johnson, she said, answering immediately. Ms. Johnson, came the voice on the other end. It was Derek, her CFO. I've gone over the figures. We're going to need to make some cuts elsewhere in the company to make room for the training initiative. But we'll need to move quickly. The shareholders will want answers. Tasha rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the decisions pressing down on her. Derek, I don't care about the shareholders right now. I care about the people who work for us. I care about the customers. We'll deal with the shareholders when the time comes. There was a pause on the line before Derek responded. All right, we'll make it work. You're right, Tasha. This is important. Let's move forward with it. Good, Tasha replied. We're not turning back. This isn't just about us. It's about changing the whole damn system. And if we do it right, others will follow. She hung up and turned her attention back to the papers on the table in front of her. There was still so much to do. There was no time for resting, no time for second-guessing. The changes had to come fast, and they had to be permanent. Later that evening, Tasha stood in front of a mirror in her hotel room, her reflection staring back at her. She wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. There was a long road ahead, one filled with resistance, with people who would push back against the change she was fighting for. But she had already made her mark. She had already shown the world that it was possible to stand up and say, enough. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders, ready for whatever came next. The fight was just beginning, and Tasha was ready to lead it. There was one thing she knew for sure. Skyline Airlines would be different, and she would be the one to make it happen. The next morning, Tasha sat at her desk in the quiet of her hotel suite, the early sunlight streaming through the windows. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications, emails, messages from her team, updates on the press release, and, of course, the media's reactions to the public announcement about the changes at Skyline Airlines. She hadn't expected the backlash to come so quickly. Some headlines praised the initiative, calling it a bold step forward, while others were more skeptical, questioning whether it was all just corporate window dressing. Tasha didn't care. The critics could say what they wanted. She had made her point. The real work was just beginning. Her assistant, Marcus, knocked lightly on the door before entering with a stack of papers. He had been with her for years, always calm, always reliable. Morning, Tasha. The press wants a follow-up statement. They're demanding specifics on how the new training programs will be enforced. And the shareholders... He paused, his eyes flicking to the screen of her phone, where a few worried messages from the finance team were visible. The shareholders are starting to ask for more concrete numbers on the potential impact. Tasha didn't look up from the papers in front of her. Tell them to hold off, she said flatly. The press will wait. I'm not ready to give them the specifics yet. This isn't about metrics. It's about change. They'll understand when they see it. Marcus hesitated. He could see the fire in her eyes, the conviction that had driven her from the very beginning. All right. I'll make sure the team knows we're focusing on the bigger picture. But we can't avoid the financials for long. The board is restless. Tasha sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Tell the board to calm down. I'm not moving until I'm sure we've got a plan that works. Numbers will come. The culture change will come first. The phone buzzed again. Tasha glanced at the screen. This time, it was a text from Derek, her CFO. I've scheduled a meeting with the board for 3 p.m. They want answers on costs and implementation. Will you be joining us? Tasha took a breath. Tell Derek I'll be there. It's time to make them see it our way. By 3 in the afternoon, Tasha was standing in front of the boardroom, her posture tall and commanding, her mind focused on the upcoming conversation. As she entered, the room fell silent. The executives who had been talking amongst themselves immediately stopped. Derek was sitting at the head of the table, the usual smugness in his posture gone. There was no doubt that they were all on edge. Everything was changing, and no one really knew what the future would hold. Tasha walked to her seat at the head of the table and placed her tablet down in front of her. All right, let's get this over with, she said, her tone cold but not unkind. The tension in the room was palpable, but she was used to it. She had always carried a weight that others weren't prepared for. Derek cleared his throat. Tasha, I know you want to move forward with these changes, but the reality is, we're going to need substantial financial backing to make this happen. The training programs alone— I don't care about the training programs right now, Derek, she interrupted, her voice steady but firm. I care about what we stand for. We're at a crossroads, and you all need to decide which direction we're going to take. Either we continue down the same old path and pretend that everything is fine, or we make this company something worth believing in. The room was still, and she could see the board members shifting uncomfortably. They weren't used to her taking control like this, but Tasha wasn't interested in their comfort. You want the numbers, Derek? Fine. I'm not going to give them to you. Not until you show me that you understand what we're doing here. These aren't just policies. This is a cultural shift, and it's not going to come cheap, but it will be worth it. One of the older board members, Mr. Whitaker, spoke up. But how can we guarantee this works? We need results, Tasha. The shareholders won't tolerate uncertainty for long. Mr. Whitaker, if you think I'm here to guarantee anything, you've got it wrong, Tasha said, her voice unwavering. What I am here to do is lead this company into a future where people like you, people like all of us, are forced to acknowledge that we've been doing it wrong. The numbers will come, but first, we need to get it right. And that means we treat everyone the same. That means we ensure Skyline Airlines stands for something more than just profit. Her eyes scanned the room, noting the faces of the executives, each one trying to figure out where they stood in all of this. Derek was quiet, watching her carefully, as though trying to figure out what she was going to say next. How are we supposed to know if it works? Another board member, Ms. Franklin, asked hesitantly. How do we know that this will actually translate into better customer satisfaction or higher retention rates? Tasha leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Because we're not just talking about customer satisfaction or retention. We're talking about changing the very fabric of how we do business. People will feel it. They'll know that when they fly with us, they matter. Not just because of what they can afford, but because we treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are, what they look like, or what they can pay. And that's going to build loyalty. And when people feel valued, they'll come back. This isn't a gimmick. It's a commitment. There was a long silence, and Tasha could feel the weight of their judgment hanging in the air. But she didn't flinch. She had done the work. She had fought for this moment, and she wasn't about to back down now. Finally, Derek spoke. All right, Tasha. We'll move forward with it. But we'll need to make sure the financials make sense in the long run. Tasha nodded, her gaze never leaving his. That's your job, Derek. I'll handle the rest. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her hotel room, the phone buzzed again. It was Marcus, her assistant. Tasha, the press is asking for a comment on the implementation timeline for the changes. They want something official. Tasha smiled softly, running a hand through her hair. Tell them we're not giving timelines. Not yet. The changes are happening now. We'll make the announcements as we go, but don't let anyone think this is a 5-minute fix. It's going to take time, but when it's done, people will know that Skyline Airlines stands for something real. She ended the call and stared out the window at the darkening skyline. She had made her decision. There was no turning back. Tasha knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, challenges, and obstacles. But for the first time, she felt a sense of certainty in what she was doing. This wasn't just about running a company. It was about changing the way the world saw business. It was about proving that power, when used with integrity, could change everything. And she was ready to lead it. Tasha stood in front of the large window in her suite, the bustling city of London sprawling beneath her. The lights were just starting to twinkle on, reflecting the energy of the day fading into night. She had always found a sense of peace in these moments of solitude. But tonight was different. Tonight, she was on the brink of something huge, something that could change the course of Skyline Airlines, and maybe, just maybe, the whole industry. But as much as she felt the weight of it all, she didn't feel fear. She felt anticipation. She had made a decision weeks ago to fight for a future where respect wasn't negotiable, and she wasn't about to back down now. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, and with it, the countdown to tomorrow's press conference. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping her back to the moment. It was Marcus. Tasha, the press team is ready. They prepared everything for tomorrow. The briefing with the shareholders is in 2 hours, and we're expecting some tough questions. Tasha picked up the phone, already knowing what he was going to say. Tell them to bring it. We're ready. I'll make sure, Marcus replied. I'm sending over the final schedule for the day, but there's something else you should know. The shareholders are getting antsy. Some of the major investors are starting to ask why this change is necessary at all. They want the financials, the concrete proof that this will work. Tasha's jaw tightened. Tell them the proof will come in time. I'm not playing their game. The future of this airline isn't about numbers on a sheet. It's about dignity. We'll give them the return on investment they're asking for, but it won't be immediate. What we're building is a legacy. Got it, Tasha, Marcus said. I'll make sure they understand. She ended the call, her mind already racing. The shareholders' impatience was expected. She'd known this would be the hardest part of her plan, convincing people who only saw profit margins and quarterly reports that the long-term value of Skyline Airlines would come not just from market share, but from the kind of respect they showed their customers and employees. They would never understand until they saw the results for themselves. The knock on her door was soft, but urgent. Tasha opened it to find Derek, her CFO, standing in the hallway with a folder in hand. He looked both exhausted and eager. Tasha, we need to talk. She gestured for him to enter, and he quickly walked in, closing the door behind him. The press conference tomorrow, the shareholder meeting after. We've been preparing for this, but I don't think anyone is ready for the questions that are coming. They're skeptical, and frankly, they're worried. Tasha took a deep breath, feeling the pressure mount, but her voice remained steady. I'm ready. We've been preparing for this moment since the beginning. They want numbers? Fine. They want results? They'll get them. But they have to trust me. Trust that what we're doing is more than just a shift in policy. It's a shift in how we see the world. If they can't see that, then maybe they aren't the right people to be holding stakes in this company. Derek placed the folder down in front of her, his expression serious. I know you're confident, but I'm worried. If we don't have concrete data showing how this will affect our bottom line in the short term, we could lose some of them. You need to make sure you have something to back up your vision. Tasha flipped open the folder, scanning the numbers that Derek had compiled. There was no denying the cold truth of the data. Revenue from customer satisfaction initiatives had historically shown a slow return. And while they could argue the importance of creating a culture of respect, it wasn't going to pay the bills tomorrow. "You're right," she said after a long pause. "But I've already made up my mind. We're not going to chase the numbers right now. We're going to change the culture first. The rest will follow. And if the shareholders can't get behind that, we'll find the right people who will." Derek didn't respond right away, his eyes scanning the figures in front of him. He had worked with Tasha long enough to know when she was resolute. He didn't like it, but he respected it. "I'm just making sure you're prepared. If you want to push this through, we need to have something more tangible for them. This airline is your vision, Tasha. But I can't promise it'll be easy to keep everyone on board." Tasha closed the folder, meeting his eyes. "Derek, if they want numbers, I'll give them numbers. But I won't let this company become a slave to them. The legacy we build here isn't just about profit. It's about creating a place where people want to work, where customers feel valued, and where we respect each other. That's the return on investment I'm offering." Derek sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I hope you're right, Tasha." "I am," she said firmly, her voice never wavering. "Now let's make sure tomorrow goes smoothly. We'll give them the answers they need, and we'll show them who we really are." The press conference the next morning was a whirlwind. Tasha stood at the podium, the bright lights of the cameras blinding her for a moment, but she didn't flinch. She had been in front of far more intimidating crowds. She had led meetings with politicians, with executives from companies far bigger than hers. This was nothing. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Her chance to redefine the future of Skyline Airlines. The questions came fast and furious. The reporters wanted to know about the financials, about how the changes would affect ticket prices, about whether the training programs were truly necessary. Tasha answered them all with the calm, collected confidence that had become her trademark. She didn't give them specifics. They didn't deserve specifics yet. What they needed to hear was that she had a vision for a better future, one where customers and employees alike were treated with dignity. One reporter, a sharp-looking man with glasses, asked, "Johnson, how do you justify these changes when they aren't likely to produce immediate financial returns? Aren't you worried about the short-term effects on your shareholders?" Tasha smiled, but it wasn't a smile of reassurance. It was a smile of absolute certainty. "I'm not worried about the short term. I'm worried about the long term. Skyline Airlines isn't just another airline. It's a company that stands for something. It's a company that will become known for treating its people with respect, because that's what will set us apart from the competition. And when you treat people right, the results follow. It's not always instant, but it's always worth it." The reporter hesitated for a moment, clearly trying to find a way to poke holes in her argument. But there were no holes. Tasha knew exactly what she was saying, and she knew the truth of it. She could see the shift in the room as the reporters began to respect her words, even if they didn't fully agree. They knew she wasn't just another CEO spouting corporate jargon. She was speaking from a place of conviction. The questions eventually slowed, and Tasha knew it was time to wrap it up. She finished with a simple but powerful statement. This company isn't about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about people. It's about creating a culture of respect, integrity, and accountability. Skyline Airlines is going to be a place where everyone, from the CEO to the newest hire, knows that they matter. And that's the change we're bringing. The room fell silent for a moment before the flashes of cameras erupted. The reporters were scribbling notes, their questions fading into the background. Tasha stepped away from the podium, her heart still steady. She had said what needed to be said. Now the real work would begin. As she left the press conference room, Marcus was waiting for her. He gave her a quick nod. That went well. The board's already reacting to the press coverage. Tasha nodded, but didn't break stride. Good. Let's make sure they keep reacting. The real work starts now. And with that, she walked out of the room, her mind already turning toward the next step in her plan. This was just the beginning. Tasha stood by the large window in her office, looking out over the city as the sky darkened. The weight of the decisions she had made in the past few days was starting to settle into her bones. But there was no fear, only the steady pulse of purpose. The press conference had gone better than expected. The response was strong, but she knew the real test wasn't the media. It was the shareholders, the ones who only cared about the bottom line. She had spent years building this company, and now she was about to shake it all up. No more playing by the old rules. She had set a course, and nothing was going to stop her. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Marcus again. "Tasha, we've got a problem. The shareholders aren't happy. They're demanding a detailed report on how these changes will affect our revenue in the next quarter. They want concrete projections." Tasha ran a hand through her hair, letting out a slow breath. The pressure was on, but she had been here before. "Marcus, remind them what I said. This is a long-term game. If they want short-term results, they're in the wrong business." "They know that," he said, his voice a little quieter. "But we're dealing with the old guard, Tasha. They want numbers, and fast." Tasha looked down at the papers on her desk. The financials, the projections, the cost of implementing the training program. She had known this was coming. The numbers weren't immediate. They weren't designed to be. But the truth was, no one had ever thought this big. Not in her industry. She had a vision that no one else understood. Not yet. "I'll speak with them," she said, standing up and walking toward the door. "But I won't compromise on the bigger picture. Let's get ready for the meeting." The meeting with the shareholders was held later that afternoon, and as Tasha walked into the conference room, she felt the familiar weight of every gaze on her. The room was full of the most powerful people in the airline industry, each one sitting behind polished tables, their faces set with a mixture of expectation and skepticism. Tasha didn't sit at the head of the table like usual. Instead, she stood in the middle of the room, facing them. "Let's get this over with," she began, her voice clear and commanding. She could see the tension in their faces, the way their eyes shifted, sizing her up. She didn't give them the satisfaction of her discomfort. "You wanted to know about the numbers. I'll give you numbers. But first, you need to understand something. We're not here just to make money. We're here to build something that lasts. Something that goes beyond profit margins." There were murmurs from the room, and she could feel the pushback. But she wasn't backing down. Skyline Airlines has always been about more than just flying people from point A to point B. It's about the experience. It's about showing people that they matter, whether they're in first class or economy. That's what separates us from the competition. And that's where we're going to put our focus. We are going to change how the entire industry views customer service, how it views its employees. And that's going to take time. The board members exchanged looks, some nodding slightly, others more skeptical. Mr. Whitaker, an older man who had been on the board longer than anyone else, cleared his throat. "Tasha, you've always been a visionary, but this change you're talking about, it's going to cost us, and we need to know when that investment is going to start paying off. If this company isn't profitable in the short term, we won't be able to keep the doors open long enough for the long-term strategy to work." Tasha met his gaze, unflinching. "I've been in this business long enough to know that short-term profit isn't the be-all and end-all. We've been running at a loss in the short term for years, and guess what? We're still here. We've been a top-tier airline with a loyal customer base. But that loyalty is going to mean a hell of a lot more when we're known for something bigger than just the usual flight service. We're going to redefine what it means to fly." "Redefine it how?" Ms. Franklin asked, folding her arms across her chest. She wasn't one to back down easily. and Tasha knew this would be a tough crowd. Tasha didn't flinch. We're going to invest in the people who work for us, not just the bottom line. That means ensuring that every employee, from the flight attendants to the pilots to the customer service reps, is treated with respect, given the tools they need to succeed. When you build a strong foundation inside, it shows on the outside, and that's going to pay off. I get what you're saying, Tasha, Mr. Whitaker said, his voice low and measured. But these things cost money, and we can't afford to just throw money at this without knowing exactly when we're going to see returns. The shareholders won't tolerate a project like this unless you can show us the hard numbers. Tasha leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. The numbers will come. They always do. But you need to trust me. Skyline Airlines isn't just going to be profitable because we have good seats and good food. It's going to be profitable because we've created a company that people will believe in. And when people believe in you, they'll pay for that belief. It's not just about flying people. It's about creating an experience that they can't get anywhere else. The kind of experience that makes them want to come back. The room was quiet for a long moment, and Tasha could see the internal battle playing out on their faces. They were hesitant, yes, but they were listening. She could feel the shift, the subtle movement from skepticism to curiosity. Finally, Derek spoke up. We'll need to see projections, he said, not just for the cultural changes, but for the financial impact. You're asking for a lot of trust here, Tasha. And while I believe in your vision, we still need the hard data to present to the shareholders. Tasha nodded, her face calm. You'll have it. But I'm not backing down. This is the direction we're going. If you want to be part of it, great. If not, I'll find someone who will. The room went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, one filled with contemplation. Tasha knew she was pushing them, but she also knew that if she didn't, she'd never get them to truly commit to the change she was proposing. It wasn't about the money. It was about the vision. After a moment, Mr. Whitaker spoke again, his tone more conciliatory. All right, we'll give you the room to make it work, but we'll need those numbers, Tasha. You've got until the next quarterly meeting to show us something concrete. We'll hold off on any drastic moves for now, but you need to prove this works. Tasha didn't hesitate. You'll see it, and when you do, you'll know it was the right choice. With that, the meeting came to a close. Tasha stood, her heart still steady, and walked out of the room with the calm confidence of someone who knew she had just won the first battle of many. There was a lot of work left to do, but for the first time, she felt the weight of the company shifting beneath her feet. It wasn't just about profit. It was about legacy. And she was ready to leave hers. Tasha's phone buzzed relentlessly as she made her way back to her hotel after the board meeting. She had expected resistance, but this was more than she had anticipated. The shareholders weren't convinced. Their concerns about the financial impact of the cultural shift were louder than ever. She had expected them to challenge her, but she hadn't expected the level of doubt to run so deep. The press was relentless too. Headlines like, Skyline's new CEO pushes for change at a high cost, and Is Tasha Johnson's vision just a dream? Filled her inbox. It wasn't just the shareholders who were skeptical. It was the entire industry. And as much as she hated to admit it, the pressure was starting to get to her. Her assistant Marcus called, his voice tight with urgency. Tasha, the shareholders are requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow. They want more numbers, more details on the projected timeline, and they're demanding a clear strategy on how this change will directly impact revenue. I think they're losing faith in the direction you're pushing. Tasha stopped in her tracks. The street was bustling with pedestrians, the city alive with its usual energy, but she felt completely alone in that moment. I won't be rushed, Marcus, she said, her voice low but firm. Tell them we'll meet, but they're not getting the numbers they want. Not yet. I'm not giving up on this. She ended the call, the weight of the decision settling heavily on her shoulders.
She was right to push for the change, but now she could feel the resistance creeping in from every direction. The airline, her vision, was being tested, and the cracks in the foundation were becoming harder to ignore. That night, as she sat in her hotel room staring out at the skyline, she realized she couldn't keep fighting alone. The pressure was starting to crack even her resolve. She needed someone who truly understood her vision, someone who could help her push through the growing resistance. Her mind wandered back to the conversation with Derek, her CFO, earlier that week. He had been the voice of reason, always the one to remind her of the bottom line. But even he was starting to buckle under the pressure.
She needed a different kind of support, someone who believed in her vision as much as she did. There was only one person who came to mind. The next morning, Tasha flew back to New York. The air was thick with tension as she entered the conference room for the emergency shareholder meeting. The executives sat around the table, their faces grim and unreadable. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Tasha could feel the pressure in the air, but she remained calm, walking to the front of the room with a steady, measured pace. Mr. Whitaker, the oldest board member, spoke first, his voice low but sharp. Tasha, we've given you more than enough time. The projections we're looking for are missing. You promised us results, and we're not seeing them. The airline's profits are at risk. Tasha's gaze met his, unwavering. Mr. Whitaker, I've always been transparent with you. I've told you from the start that this is a long-term investment, and it's not going to happen overnight. This isn't just about the immediate return. It's about creating something that lasts. She turned to face the entire board. I'm not asking for blind faith. I'm asking for a commitment to something bigger than the short-term profits. You've all seen how the airline industry is evolving. Customers are demanding more than just good service. They want integrity. They want to know that the companies they're giving their money to are aligned with their values. Ms. Franklin, another board member, spoke up. I agree with you, Tasha, but there's a difference between vision and practicality. How are we supposed to justify this kind of change to the investors when we can't show them concrete results? Tasha took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room. She could see their concern. They were worried about the financials, worried that she was making a mistake. But she knew she couldn't give in now. Not when they were so close to something real. The results will come, Tasha said, her voice steady. But it won't be in the form you're expecting. You won't see them on the balance sheet right away. This is about building loyalty, not just customer loyalty, but loyalty from our employees. When you create an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and heard, that's when the results will start showing up. The customers will come back. The profits will follow. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. This company has always been about more than just flying people from one place to another. It's about creating a space where people feel they belong. That's the value we're selling. And when we've built that, the results will speak for themselves. There was a long silence, the board members digesting her words. Mr. Whitaker was the first to speak again, his tone softer than before. We understand your vision, Tasha, but we need more than just passion. We need to see a plan, a clear roadmap, and we need you to show us that this is going to work, not just for the company, but for the shareholders. Tasha nodded, her eyes focused on him. I will show you. I will give you the roadmap you need. But we're not going to rush this. We're going to do it right, and when it's done, Skyline Airlines will be stronger than ever. The room was still, the board members weighing her words. Finally, Derek spoke up, his voice reluctant. All right, Tasha. We'll give you the time you need. But you need to start showing us progress soon. If we don't see the returns we're expecting, we'll have to reconsider our support. Tasha met his gaze and nodded. You'll see it, Derek. You'll see it all. As the meeting ended, Tasha walked out of the room, her mind already racing ahead. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. This was just another battle, and she was determined to win the war. She would show them that Skyline Airlines could be more than just a profitable airline. It could be a company that changed the world. But to do that, she needed to act fast. And for that, she needed a team she could trust, one that believed in the bigger picture as much as she did. As she made her way back to her office, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Marcus. The press is asking for another statement. They want to know when they'll see results from the changes. Tasha smiled, knowing exactly what to say. The results are coming, and when they do, everyone will know that Skyline Airlines isn't just a company. It's a revolution. She sent the message and sat back in her chair. The battle wasn't over yet, but she was ready for whatever came next. Tasha stood at the window of her office, staring out at the city as the light from the setting sun bathed the skyline in a warm, golden hue. The chaos of the past few weeks had given way to a brief moment of calm, but she knew it wouldn't last long. Skyline Airlines was on the verge of a new era, and every step she took toward that future was met with resistance. The shareholders had agreed to give her more time, but they were impatient. They wanted results, and they wanted them now. Tasha knew that, but she also knew that the changes she was making weren't something that could be rushed. Her phone buzzed, cutting through the silence of the room. She glanced at the screen and saw Marcus's name. Tasha, we've got a situation. The press is starting to turn. The headlines are changing, and they're starting to ask harder questions. There's a growing concern from the financial analysts that your vision might be too expensive, and they're predicting it could impact our earnings this quarter. Tasha exhaled slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. She could feel the weight of the pressure, but she refused to let it show. Tell them to keep asking questions, she said, her voice steady. I've made it clear to everyone that the road we're on isn't an easy one, but I believe in it, and they'll see the results. I'll handle the press, but the shareholders, Marcus started, his voice trailing off. The shareholders will have to wait, Tasha interrupted. I've given them all the information they need. The rest is up to me. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Marcus spoke again, his tone more cautious. I know you believe in this, Tasha, but there's a limit to how long they're going to give you. They're not going to sit by and watch the company go down a path that doesn't show immediate returns. If you don't start showing some progress soon, I'll show them progress when it's ready, Tasha replied firmly, cutting him off. We're not here to make short-term profits. We're here to build something that will last. She hung up, her gaze shifting from the city outside to the paperwork on her desk. The shareholder meeting was coming up fast, and she had to be ready. Tasha had spent the last few days reviewing every aspect of the company's operations, ensuring that everything was aligned with her vision. The changes were already in motion, she could feel it. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still so much more to do. Her door opened, and Derek stepped in, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something more urgent. Tasha, we need to talk. The meeting tomorrow. It's not going to be easy. The board is getting anxious. They want to know exactly when they'll see the financial impact of the new policies. They're starting to push back. Tasha looked up from her desk, her eyes meeting his. I told you, Derek, this is not about immediate financial returns. This is about changing the culture of the airline. It's about creating an environment where people are treated with respect. That's the value we're selling. That's what's going to set us apart from the competition. I understand that, but the shareholders don't see it that way, Derek said, his voice quiet but insistent. They're worried, and they're not going to be patient much longer. You need to start showing them something more tangible. They want numbers, Tasha. Tasha leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. I've already told you what I'm going to do. The numbers will come, Derek. but they can't come until we lay the foundation. That's the part no one wants to see. They want the results now. But this company needs to grow into something better. I'm not going to compromise on that." Derek sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're not going to back down, are you?" "No," Tasha said, her voice firm. "Not this time. I've made my decision, and they're either going to follow me or they're not. But I'm not going to let anyone stand in the way of what we're building here." The next day, Tasha arrived at the boardroom early, the tension already hanging thick in the air. The board members were seated at the long table, their faces stern, their eyes trained on the documents in front of them. They were waiting for her to speak, to explain how she was going to fix the mess they saw Skyline Airlines heading toward. But Tasha wasn't there to fix anything. She was there to lead. She walked into the room, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, and took her place at the head of the table. She didn't waste time. "I know you've all been questioning the changes I've implemented," she began, her voice cutting through the silence. "But I want to remind you all of something. We are at a turning point. This company has been running on autopilot for too long. We've been focusing on short-term profits, and that's all we've been getting. Short-term results." There was a murmur of discontent from the board, but Tasha didn't let it faze her. She wasn't here to please anyone. She was here to change everything. "I'm not here to apologize for the path we're on. This is the future of Skyline Airlines. We're going to create a company that doesn't just fly people from one place to another. We're going to create a company that makes people feel valued. That's how we're going to stand out. That's how we're going to grow." She paused, letting her words sink in. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat, clearly skeptical. "Tasha, we're all for change, but we need to see something concrete. This company isn't a charity. We need results, and we need them now. We've given you time, but the clock is ticking." Tasha met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "I know the clock is ticking, Mr. Whitaker, and I'm not wasting time. I've already laid the groundwork for the changes. We've got new training programs in place. We're overhauling customer service. But these things take time. The changes we're making won't be seen overnight. But when they start to show up, they'll show up in ways you can't ignore. And when they do, we'll be in a position to lead the industry, not just follow it." The board was silent, digesting her words. Derek shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. But Tasha knew she had to push through this moment. She had to show them that her vision wasn't just an idea, it was a revolution in the making. Finally, Ms. Franklin spoke, her tone sharper than before. "Tasha, with all due respect, we need to know exactly when we're going to see results. The airline is at a crossroads, and if we don't see the financial impact soon, we'll have no choice but to rethink the direction we're going." Tasha's gaze never wavered. "I've already told you. The results will come. But they'll come when we've built something strong enough to sustain them. If you want to pull the plug before we've even had a chance to get started, then maybe Skyline Airlines isn't the right fit for you. But I believe in this company, and I believe in what we're doing here." There was another long pause before Mr. Whitaker spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "All right, Tasha. We'll give you the time. But you'd better deliver. The shareholders are watching, and they won't wait forever." Tasha nodded, her resolve as strong as ever. "I will deliver. You have my word." As the meeting adjourned, she walked out of the boardroom with a quiet confidence. The pressure was immense, but she knew she had made the right decision. Skyline Airlines was on the verge of something extraordinary, and no one, not the shareholders, not the critics, could stop her now. The days after the shareholder meeting passed in a blur, that Tasha felt more determined than ever. The pressure was still mounting, but she had always thrived under pressure. Each phone call, each email, each new headline questioning her decisions only solidified her resolve. She had one goal now: to make Skyline Airlines the company she knew it could be, one that led with integrity, treated its employees with respect, and became the standard for customer service in the industry. But the world didn't always wait for visionaries to catch up. They wanted results, and they wanted them fast. The team was working around the clock, pushing forward with the cultural initiatives she had set in motion. The new training programs were being rolled out, customer service protocols were being rewritten, and feedback was being collected from employees at every level. Tasha was pleased with the progress, but she knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. The following week, as she sat in her office late one evening, going over reports, her phone buzzed again. It was Marcus, his voice tight with urgency. "Tasha, we've got a situation. The press is circling again. They're focusing on the delays in seeing immediate returns and how we're losing ground. There's talk of potential investor backlash. They're asking why we haven't seen measurable progress after all the changes we've announced." Tasha didn't flinch. "Tell them to hold their horses. We're doing this the right way. They can either stay on board or get off the train. But we're moving forward." "Understood, but we may need to reconsider how we frame this to the public," Marcus continued, his voice quieter now. "They're getting louder, and if this goes on much longer, it could hurt the company's image." Tasha sat back in her chair, staring out the window. She knew the press would only continue to scrutinize, but she had no intention of buckling. "I've already said it, Marcus," she said firmly. "We're in this for the long haul. The changes will come, and when they do, they'll be undeniable. I'm not going to cave just because people don't see the vision yet." The conversation ended quickly, and Tasha turned her attention back to the reports scattered across her desk. She could feel the eyes of the world on her, eyes that didn't understand the long-term nature of her goals. But that was fine. They didn't have to. She had faith in the direction she was taking. A few days later, Tasha arrived at the airport for an important meeting with a group of international investors. The tension in the air was palpable as she walked into the conference room. The investors sat around the table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They had been hearing a lot about Skyline Airlines' new direction, but none of them had seen tangible results yet. They wanted proof. They wanted numbers. And Tasha had to deliver. She had no other choice. She walked to the front of the room, taking her place behind the podium. The room quieted immediately as her presence commanded attention. "Thank you for meeting with me today," Tasha began, her voice clear and calm. "I know you've all heard about the changes happening at Skyline Airlines. You've read the press releases, you've seen the headlines. But what you haven't seen is the work we've put in behind the scenes. You haven't seen the commitment we're making to change the culture of this company from the ground up." There was a brief pause as she scanned the room, meeting the eyes of each investor. She could feel their skepticism, but she wasn't intimidated. She wasn't backing down. "We've already started implementing our new training programs. We've rolled out customer service initiatives, and we've invested heavily in employee development. But most importantly, we've created a company culture that values respect, accountability, and integrity. That's the foundation we're building on, and it's going to make Skyline Airlines stronger than ever." One of the investors, Mr. Roberts, raised an eyebrow. "Tasha, I'm sure the culture changes are necessary, but we need to see numbers. We need to understand how this is going to impact our bottom line. When will we see a return on this investment?" Tasha didn't hesitate. "You'll see it. Not tomorrow, not next week. But when the customers start coming back, when our employees are more engaged and productive, when our brand stands for something people can believe in, that's when you'll see the return. This isn't a quick fix. It's a transformation." Mr. Roberts wasn't convinced. "And how long do you expect that to take?" Tasha stood tall, meeting his gaze with unwavering confidence. "I expect it to take as long as it needs. but it will happen. The industry is changing, and if we're going to stay ahead, we need to lead that change. We're not just chasing profits. We're building a company that will stand the test of time. The room was silent for a moment as the investors processed her words. They had all heard promises like this before, grand visions without the substance to back them up. But there was something different about Tasha. There was a fire in her eyes, a sense of determination that was hard to ignore. Finally, Mr. Roberts spoke again, his voice softer this time. I believe in your vision, Tasha, but you need to show us something. We need to see the path to profitability. We can't afford to wait too long for those results. Tasha nodded. I understand, but I'm not going to sacrifice the integrity of this company just to meet short-term goals. We're building something bigger, something that will last, and when it's ready, it will change the industry. The meeting ended with a sense of cautious optimism. The investors weren't fully convinced, but they were willing to give Tasha a little more time. As she left the conference room, she could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. The next few months would determine everything. She needed to stay focused, to keep pushing forward, no matter the obstacles in her way. As she walked out of the building, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Marcus. The media's already picking up on your comments from the investor meeting. Some positive feedback, but the financial analysts are still asking for numbers. The pressure is mounting. Tasha smiled faintly. The pressure was always going to be there. But she knew the truth. They could ask for numbers, but the most important thing they needed was to see the results of a company built on respect and integrity. It was only a matter of time before they saw it for themselves. As she walked down the steps of the building, she felt more determined than ever. The journey ahead would be tough, but she was ready. If you believe in standing up for what's right, no matter the challenges, hit the like button, subscribe to stay updated on Tasha's journey, and comment with the 3 words, "Change is coming."